They say Oregon is beautiful, lush forests, misty coasts, mountains that scrape the clouds. But beauty can be a disguise, because behind the green canopy and quiet towns, something ancient has been waiting. These are not ghost tales whispered around campfires. These are the dark corners of Oregon itself. Places where the fog moves against the wind, where radios hum with voices that shouldn't exist, where houses remember their last owners, and the roads remember their last travelers. Tonight, we go deeper than the postcards and hiking trails. We're peeling back the calm to show you the real Oregon, the one that watches you when you're alone, the one that hums your name when no one else is there. From the cursed house that whispers to the road that speaks back. These are the Oregon horror stories. If you're brave enough to keep watching, don't just listen, pay attention, because the strange thing about Oregon's darkness is that sometimes it follows you home. There's a stretch of road cutting through central Oregon where the high desert meets the forest. Highway 97. To most, it's just an endless, lonely ribbon of asphalt connecting small towns and forgotten truck stops. But to locals, it's something else entirely. They call it the Whisper Road, because when the wind dies and the stars vanish behind the clouds, the highway begins to speak. It always starts the same way. A traveler alone. The radio flickers with static. The temperature drops a few degrees even in summer. And then, voices, soft, pleading voices, that slip through the static like a memory you shouldn't still remember. No one ever catches more than a few words. Help! Don't stop! Turn around. In 2006, a long-haul driver named Mark Dalton vanished somewhere between Klamath Falls and Bend. His rig was found idling on the side of the highway near mile marker 247. Headlights still on, driver's door open. His logbook said he'd stopped to rest. But his dash cam, retrieved later by state police, showed something stranger. At exactly 2:13 a.m., Mark's cab light flickers. You can hear him mutter, "Power surge again?" and reach for the switch. Then, a whisper. A woman's voice, faint, from somewhere inside the cab. "Do you see them?" He freezes. You can see his reflection in the windshield, his eyes wide, scanning the empty highway. Then the CB radio crackles to life. A male voice, raspy, urgent. "Don't look at the lights, driver. Keep your eyes forward." Mark grabs the mic. "What lights? Who is this?" No response. Then, a bright white glow floods the cab, as if a car's headlights were pointed straight through his window. But the dash cam shows the road behind him is empty. The glow flickers. And then, everything in the truck, the papers, his coffee cup, even his hair, lifts slightly, as if gravity had loosened its grip. There's a long, drawn-out creak, like metal bending under pressure. Then static. When the image clears, the truck is empty. The driver's seat is still warm, his coffee steaming. Mark Dalton was never found. For years, people dismissed it as a hoax, a viral creepypasta before the word even existed. But then, it happened again. In 2014, a group of college students, returning from Crater Lake, reported seeing floating headlights weaving through the forest beside the road. They followed for nearly 20 minutes before realizing there was no car, just lights. And when the driver finally pulled over in panic, one of the backseat passengers, a girl named Tessa, was gone. No one saw her leave. Her seatbelt was still buckled. The door was locked from the inside. Search teams combed the woods for weeks. Dogs caught a scent that led them down to a dried creek bed, where they found an old license plate half buried in the dust. The numbers matched Mark Dalton's truck. Locals have theories. Some say it's the ghosts of travelers who never made it home. Lost souls still trying to warn others. Others think it's something older, an echo of the land itself. A place where time folds and reality slips. There's even an old Klamath legend about a path between worlds, a road that appears under the right moon, when the dead walk parallel to the living. They said if you listen closely, you can hear them trying to talk through the wind. That's what the whispers are, they say. But sometimes when the moon is low and the air feels electric, truckers swear they see figures standing on the shoulder, pale shapes in the dark, holding out their hands like they're begging for a ride. They vanish when you blink, and if you stop, they say you join them. One night not long ago, a man named Ricky Lane, a mechanic from Eugene, decided to test the legend. He mounted cameras all around his car, packed food, and started his drive just before midnight. He told his audience he'd stream the whole thing live. For the first hour, it was boring, just endless dark highway and the occasional 18-wheeler. Then, around 1:47 a.m., the radio started humming. Not static, humming, like a woman singing a lullaby. Ricky laughed it off. "Guess I found the whisper lady," he joked. Then the singing stopped. A new voice came through, soft, male. "Turn off your lights." Ricky frowned. "What?" "Turn off your lights." For a moment he hesitated. Then, like a fool chasing proof, he reached out and flicked his headlights off. The screen went completely black. You could only hear his breathing, quick, nervous. Then, faintly, the camera picked up movement outside the car. Dozens of pale outlines, gliding across the highway like fog made flesh. They weren't walking, they were drifting. Ricky whispered, "Holy hell, there's people out there." Then one of the shapes pressed its face against his window. Only it wasn't a face, it was his. The camera cut out there. Police found the car later that morning, parked at mile marker 247, the same spot where Mark Dalton disappeared. Every door was locked from the inside. The headlights were on, but the seat was empty. They towed the car back to Eugene. When they checked the dashcam footage, they found something new. Ricky sitting in the driver's seat, smiling. Only, the timestamp was dated 3 days after he vanished. He looks straight into the camera and whispers, "Do you see them now?" Some say the whispers of Highway 97 aren't ghosts, they're echoes from another version of us, the ones who never made it home. Others say it's just the wind, the static, the tricks of an overtired mind. But next time you drive through Central Oregon, late at night and the radio starts to hum, don't listen, don't stop, because maybe the voices aren't calling for help. Maybe they're calling you in. They say some houses don't die when the people inside them do. They just wait. Emma didn't believe that, not when she first saw the crooked silhouette of the old farmhouse rising through the Oregon fog. The trees surrounding it were tall and brittle, stripped bare by autumn's chill, their branches like black veins against the pale sky. The dirt road had been empty for miles, just rain, mud, and the rhythmic slap of her windshield wipers. She'd inherited this house from her Uncle Harold, a man she barely remembered except for his hands, always trembling, even when he smiled. The letter from the lawyer had said, "A place of family roots." But Emma hadn't come for family. She'd come for answers. When she stepped out of the car, the wind died suddenly, as though the land itself was holding its breath. The house stood at the edge of the Columbia River Gorge, perched over the mist like something out of a forgotten dream. Its paint peeled in long curling strips. The windows were black and hollow, not reflecting light but swallowing it whole. Emma took a deep breath, her boots crunching on the wet gravel, and walked toward the porch. The first step groaned like something waking up. The second creaked louder. By the third, she thought she heard a whisper, a faint, breathy sound, almost like her name. She froze. But there was only the whisper of wind, or so she told herself. Inside, the air was still and damp, carrying the smell of rain-soaked wood, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. Dust floated in the beam of her flashlight. The wallpaper peeled in ragged strips, revealing yellowed plaster beneath. She wandered through the halls, tracing her fingers along the walls. Her uncle's things were still there, an old phonograph, stacks of newspapers, jars filled with strange, dark liquids she couldn't identify. And in every room she felt it, that subtle hum, like a vibration just beneath the skin. The house wasn't empty, it was listening. That night, Emma lay in the upstairs bedroom, the same one her uncle had died in. The bed creaked under her weight, the blankets stale with the scent of dust and mothballs. Outside, the fog pressed against the window like a living thing. She tried to sleep, but at exactly 2:14 a.m., she woke to a sound, a whisper. It came from the corner of the room, slow, deliberate. It didn't say words, it breathed them. A long inhale, then an exhale, heavy and wet, like lungs filled with water. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She turned on the lamp. Nothing. Just the room, still and quiet. But the moment she turned the light back off, the whisper began again. Closer this time. Would you have stayed? In the morning, Emma tried to shake it off. Old houses make noise, she told herself. Pipes, vents, old wood settling. She made coffee, opened the curtains, and tried to convince herself that she was just tired. Then she saw the footprints. Bare, wet, leading from the closet to the side of her bed. Her breath caught in her throat. She touched the damp outline. They were small. Too small to be her uncle's, too human to be her own. By afternoon, the unease was unbearable. She called the only neighbor she'd seen on the road, a man named Clyde, who lived half a mile down the hill. He was in his 60s, with weathered skin and pale eyes that never seemed to blink enough. When she mentioned the whispers, his face drained of color. He told her uncle hadn't been well, that Harold believed the house spoke to him, that he'd stopped leaving the property after, hearing voices in the walls, voices that promised him a way out. People in town had called him a hermit, but Clyde said it differently. He called him a man who listened too long. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She sat by the fireplace, the flames trembling weakly. The old phonograph had somehow turned itself on, playing a distorted lullaby that slowed and deepened until it became a low moan. She unplugged it. It kept playing, and from upstairs came that same whisper, dragging across the ceiling, tracing her every movement below. Would you have gone up there? She climbed the stairs, step by step, each creak louder than the last. The whisper stopped the moment she reached the landing. The attic door was slightly open, as though something had been watching her from the dark. She pushed it, and it swung wide, letting out a slow breath of cold air that smelled like rot and rain. Inside, she found boxes filled with old photos, family portraits where every face looked almost the same. But one photo stopped her. It was her uncle, sitting in the same rocking chair now turned toward the wall. And behind him, faintly visible in the photo's reflection, was another face. A woman, standing in the corner, smiling, her eyes nothing but black pits. The chair began to move, slowly, back and forth, back and forth. Emma stumbled back, her breath sharp in her throat. She tripped over a box, spilling its contents, letters, hundreds of them, all written in her uncle's trembling hand. Each one said the same thing. The house won't let me stop listening. She ran downstairs, locking herself in the bedroom. The walls seemed to pulse, as though something beneath the wallpaper was breathing. The whispers grew into voices now, layered, overlapping, pleading. He's listening. Don't stop breathing. Emma screamed for them to stop, and they did. Instantly, the silence was worse, because then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. She froze, trembling, whispering through the crack. Who's there? No answer, just another knock, louder. She pulled the door open, no one, just the fog, thick and unmoving. Yet somehow in the whiteness, she saw it. A tall, narrow figure standing by the tree line, its head tilted slightly, watching. Emma slammed the door. The whispering began again, this time inside the room. She turned toward the mirror, and for a split second, she saw movement behind her reflection. A shadow, standing exactly where she stood. "Leave me alone," she screamed, and the shadow smiled. The lights flickered and then went out. In the darkness, a voice whispered against her ear, clear and cold as breath on glass. "You shouldn't have come back." The lamp shattered. The air turned ice cold, and for a few seconds she could feel hands, cold, damp hands, wrap around her throat. Then nothing. The next morning, Clyde came by. He found the house empty, the bed unmade, the mirror fogged over, though the air was dry, and written across the glass in what looked like condensation were 2 words. Still breathing? They never found Emma. The police report called it unexplained disappearance. The locals called it what it was. The house took her back. And if you drive along the gorge at night, when the fog crawls down the road and the air goes still, roll down your windows. Listen carefully, because somewhere out there, beneath the wind and the rain, you'll hear her voice, whispering, not crying, not screaming, just whispering. And the house whispers back. Would you dare stay a night in the house that whispers? Because those who do never stop listening. They say the sea has its own kind of memory. It forgets no name, no face, no soul it's ever taken. Along the cliffs of Yaquina Head, where the Oregon coast meets the endless gray of the Pacific, stands a lighthouse that has watched the sea swallow men for over a century. Locals call it the Widow's Light. On calm days, it's a postcard, the white tower gleaming under a low sun, waves glittering like glass shards below. But when the fog rolls in thick and heavy, the light turns from a beacon to a warning, a reminder that not everything lost to the ocean stays gone. It began with Elias Harker, the first keeper. A quiet man, solemn, devoted, he tended the light with precision, logging every change in the wind, every tide shift, every ship that passed in the distance. His wife, Clara, was the warmth that filled the cold stone walls. She baked bread for sailors, tended a small garden by the cliffs, and every evening, she would climb the tower to bring Elias a cup of tea. The two were inseparable, and the townsfolk envied their devotion. Until the storm. It came without warning, a violent squall that tore the sea apart. Elias stayed in the tower all night, keeping the flame alive. But when dawn came, Clara was gone. The back door was open, her bonnet snagged on the rocks below. They said she slipped while tending the garden, that the wind had taken her. Elias never accepted that. He searched for weeks. Even after her funeral, he would stand on the cliffs at dusk, calling her name into the fog. Sometimes he swore he heard her answer. A faint voice carried on the wind, "Elias." After that, he changed. He began sleeping in the tower, refusing to leave the light for even a moment. He burned the flame day and night, saying she needed it, that the darkness frightened her. The town priest tried to intervene, but Elias only smiled and said, "She comes when it's dark. She talks to me through the glass." 3 months later, he walked into the ocean at low tide. They never found his body. Years passed. The lighthouse stood empty, its doors chained shut, the windows black. Then came Jonathan Cole, a young man from Portland, eager to prove himself. He dismissed the tales of curses and ghosts. "Lighthouses don't haunt people," he laughed. "Loneliness does." But loneliness was exactly what the sea fed on. His first night, Jonathan recorded the weather. Wind from the northwest, waves high, routine. But in his log, he added a strange line, "Fog unusually thick, smells like roses." There were no roses for miles. The next night, the flame went out at exactly 3:07 a.m. He relit it. It went out again. No draft, no explanation. He gave up near dawn and went downstairs to find the footprints. Small, bare, wet, leading up the steps and vanishing into the lens room. By the third night, he stopped sleeping. He'd begun hearing humming, a woman's voice, low and broken, carrying through the tower. Each time he tried to find her, it stopped the second he spoke. And when he returned to his room, the door would be open. The floor soaked as if someone had walked through a storm. In his journal, the entries changed. Something in the fog. "She's calling me now. Smells like the sea, but sweeter." Then came the storm, the worst in a decade. Jonathan climbed the stairs against the wind, lantern in hand. Thunder rolled and the light sputtered out. For a moment, he thought he saw movement through the lens, a shape standing just beyond the glass. He wiped the condensation away, and there she was. Clara. Her skin was gray-blue, her hair tangled and dripping with seawater. Her dress clung to her as though she'd just climbed out of the ocean. But her eyes were soft, familiar, sad. "Where's Elias?" she asked. Her voice was barely human, gurgling, soaked in salt. Jonathan froze. She reached out, her hand trembling, water trailing down her wrist. He could feel the cold coming off her in waves. She touched his face, whispering. He promised he'd wait. When he blinked, she was gone. The air was silent, except for the soft sound of weeping echoing through the tower. That night was the last entry in his log. The sea wants what it's owed. Days later, the townspeople found the door to the lighthouse wide open, the lamp extinguished. Inside they found Jonathan's boots by the stairway and his journal on the desk, soaked through, every word washed away except two. "She waits." Out on the cliffs, 2 sets of footprints led to the edge of the rocks, one large, one small, ending abruptly where the tide met stone. Now, on certain nights, When the fog thickens and the tide turns violent, the light burns on its own. Mariners claim they can see a figure standing inside the tower, her dress fluttering as though underwater, her face turned toward the horizon. And if you listen closely, the waves don't sound like waves at all. They sound like her voice, calling. Locals say she never stopped, waiting for Elias, but others whisper something else, that she's no longer waiting for him. She's waiting for anyone who will answer her call. They say if you walk the cliffs at Yakina Head and call her name, you'll hear the wind whisper it back. And if you stay long enough, you'll hear her footsteps behind you. The sea remembers, and now so will you. They say Crater Lake was born from fire, but it lives in silence. If you've ever been there, truly been there, you know what I mean. The moment you step out of your car and walk toward that rim, the sound drains from the world. The wind stops whispering. The trees stand motionless. Even the air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. Most people think it's peaceful, serene, but stay there long enough, really listen, and that silence stops feeling natural. It starts to feel aware. Park rangers never talk about it on record, but if you catch one after a few drinks, they'll tell you things. Stories about missing campers, boats drifting without passengers, strange lights moving deep below the surface, even though there are no fish, no currents, nothing alive down there. But one story never left me. It started in the summer of 1998, when a geology student named Lauren Pike disappeared during a solo research trip. 22 years old, confident, the kind of girl who laughed at ghost stories. She wasn't supposed to be afraid of anything, least of all a lake. She checked in with the ranger station on a Friday morning, told them she'd be back by Sunday night. The weather was clear, the air sharp with pine. Her last radio transmission came at 5:42 p.m. "There's something moving in the water," she said, her voice a little shaky. "It's big, I think." Then static. They thought maybe her battery died. Maybe she'd slipped and fallen. But when they found her campsite the next morning, nothing made sense. Her tent was zipped. Her lantern was still burning. Her field notebook open on a page describing mineral density. Her coat was folded neatly beside her sleeping bag. The only thing missing was her boots. Her tracks led right to the water's edge and stopped there. For 10 days, search teams combed the area. Helicopters scanned the surface. Divers went down until they hit the cold, black layer where sunlight doesn't reach. Nothing. Then, on the 11th day, a ranger spotted something drifting near Wizard Island. A single hiking boot. It floated upright, like someone standing just beneath the surface, waiting. The lake should have preserved it perfectly. The water's so pure, so cold. But when they pulled it out, it was covered in salt residue. Not minerals, salt. The kind you'd find in ocean water. That's when people started whispering again about the lake god. The Klamath tribes once called the mountain Mazama, and they believed a fiery spirit lived within it, Lao, god of the underworld. When he fell in love with a mortal woman and she rejected him, he erupted in rage, covering the valley in ash and fire. The sky god, Skell, struck him down, collapsing the mountain into itself. Where the fire once raged, water filled the wound. Crater Lake was his tomb, but the elders said his spirit never died. It slept, dreaming beneath that still blue surface, waiting for anyone foolish enough to disturb his rest. For years after Lauren vanished, the lake stayed quiet. Then in 2019, someone else tried to prove the legends wrong. A travel vlogger named Aaron Wells. He ran a YouTube channel called Urban Mythbuster. He thought the Crater Lake stories were perfect clickbait. No fish, no rivers, no reason for it to be haunted, he joked in his intro. Just a big puddle with great views. The first day of footage was normal. Clear skies, stunning shots of the rim. At sunset, he filmed a time-lapse of the lake turning gold, then black. But that night, things changed. Around midnight, the microphone picked up faint tapping, like knuckles on wood. He laughed it off. Guessed the lake's trying to say hi. Then came the next clip. He's whispering into the camera, eyes wide. It's quiet. Too quiet. Not even crickets. I can hear my heartbeat. The camera tilts toward the lake. The water looks like a sheet of obsidian. Not a ripple. But in the reflection, something moves. It's him. Only not quite. The reflection turns its head before he does. The video cuts out for 7 minutes. When it returns, the lens is wet, the sound garbled. He's running through the forest, whispering, "There's something out there. It looks like me. It keeps calling my name." Then you hear it, faintly, a second voice, identical to his, whispering from somewhere near the shore. "Aaron." The camera shakes violently. There's a flash of the lake, smooth still, except for one ripple spreading outward. Then static. When rangers found his gear 3 days later, it was scattered near the water. The tent collapsed. His camera half buried in volcanic dust. His car was still in the parking lot, doors open, engine cold. He was gone. But they found something else too. Footprints leading from his camp to the water. Then another set coming back out. No one could explain that. And yet, every year, more people disappear around Crater Lake. Hikers, campers, even rangers. Some say it's the terrain. Some say it's the weather. But the locals, they know. They say the silence is hungry. If you stand there long enough, if you stare into that impossible blue, it stares back. And if you hear your name whispered from the water, don't look, don't answer, because it's not calling to you, it's calling you home. They say Crater Lake is the deepest lake in America, but they never tell you what's at the bottom. And maybe that's for the best. And that concludes our journey through the haunted corners of Oregon. From the cliffs of Tillamook Bay to the dark halls of forgotten towns, the echoes of the past never seem to fade. They just wait for someone to listen. If these stories kept you on edge, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep the lights on, even when we probably shouldn't. Now, here's the fun part. Tell me in the comments, which state should we explore next? I'll give you a hint. It's known for its storms, but what haunts there isn't weather. I'll be reading your guesses. Until then, sleep well if you can.